My husband texted me 9 words on a Tuesday afternoon. Asterisk I'm leaving. I already packed. Don't wait up. Asterisk I read it standing at my kitchen island with a spreadsheet open on my laptop and a cup of coffee gone cold beside it. And I want you to notice something before I tell you how I reacted. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't cry into the dish towel. I set it face down next to my mouse, finished the formula I was building, and then I opened a folder on my desktop that had been sitting there, quietly filling up for exactly 22 days. Because here's what my husband didn't know when he hit send from a hotel 2 hours away. I'd already filed the divorce paperwork 3 weeks earlier, and the little camera bolted above our garage, the one I'd installed for packages, had been quietly recording the real reason he was leaving since the second week of March. Welcome back to the quiet ledger, where the numbers always tell the truth, even when the people attached to them don't. If you've ever caught a lie before anyone bothered confessing it to you, stay with me to the end, because I promise you this one gets paid back in full, receipts included. Hit subscribe now, because it only gets better from here. I want to back up, though, because the text isn't where the story starts. It's where it finally became official. If you told me on New Year's Day that by summer my husband would text me from a chain hotel off I-70 announcing he'd already packed, I'd have laughed and asked what you'd been drinking. We looked fine. We looked from the outside, like the kind of couple people quietly envied at Emma's soccer games. The two of us in folding chairs, him razzying the ref, me keeping score in my head out of habit. That's the part one need you to sit with for a minute, because it matters later. Nothing about my marriage looked broken from a folding chair on the sideline. It just was, and I didn't find that out from a conversation. I found it out the way I find everything in the numbers. My name is Claire. I'm 36, and I've spent the last 11 years as a forensic accountant, the last 4 of them as a certified fraud examiner at a firm called Callaway Forensic Group outside Columbus, Ohio. Most people hear forensic accountant and picture something out of a crime show. It's quieter than that. It's spreadsheets. It's bank statements laid out like a crime scene nobody bothered taping off. Companies hire us when they suspect someone on the inside is stealing, and 90% of the job isn't suspicion, it's pattern. Fraud is almost never one big theft. It's small, repeated, deliberately unremarkable withdrawals, sized specifically to stay under whatever number triggers a second look. My old boss, a soft-spoken man named Tom Wickham, who trained me my first year out of grad school, used to say the same sentence over almost every file he ever handed me. Asterisk, the transaction never lies. People do. Asterisk, I didn't know yet how many times I'd repeat that to myself in my own kitchen. I met Ryan 9 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue in Grandview. He sold building materials for a regional distributor, the kind of job that requires you to remember birthdays, golf handicaps, and which client prefers bourbon over beer, and he was genuinely, effortlessly good at it. People liked him in a room the way people like a song they already know the words to. We got married 2 years later in his parents' backyard, the kind of wedding with mason jars and a borrowed sound system. Emma came along when I was 29. We bought a 4-bedroom colonial on Sycamore Grove Court with a detached garage and a mortgage that felt aggressive at the time and reasonable now, and for a long stretch of years, that was simply my life. Client files during the day. Emma's homework at the kitchen table in the evening. Ryan traveling 3 or 4 days a month for regional accounts, which had always been normal, which is exactly why it took me so long to notice when normal quietly changed shape. The first thing I noticed, and I only recognized it as the first thing in hindsight, was the phone. Ryan had never been a phone face-down kind of guy. He left it on the counter while he showered. He'd hand it to Emma to play games in the pediatrician's waiting room without a second thought. Sometime around late January, that stopped. The phone came into the bathroom with him. It buzzed on the nightstand at 11 at night, and he'd glance at it and set it face down again without a word. I noticed the way you notice a picture frame, sitting a half-inch off-center. Not alarming, just slightly wrong. Then came the gym. Ryan had talked about getting back into shape for 3 straight years without once acting on it. And then one Saturday in February, he came home with a membership card to a 24-hour place 2 exits down and a gym bag I'd never seen, and he started leaving 45 minutes earlier than his new gym schedule required to make it to work on time. I did the math without meaning to. It's an occupational hazard. 45 minutes doesn't buy you a shower and a workout on top of a normal commute. It buys you a workout, or it buys you something else, and I filed the thought away the way I file every stray detail that doesn't add up yet. March brought the trips. Not new trips, just more of them, and longer. A 2-day regional check-in stretched into 3. A Thursday flight became a Wednesday flight to beat traffic. I noticed because I was the one rearranging Emma's schedule around them, not because I was keeping score. Somewhere in there I found a receipt in his jacket pocket while doing laundry, a hotel 40 minutes from his own office. Dated a Tuesday, he told me he worked from home. I didn't say anything. I put it in the pocket of my own robe and stood in the laundry room for exactly as long as the dryer buzzer let me. And then I went back downstairs and helped Emma with a fraction worksheet like nothing had happened, because nothing had happened yet. Not officially. Not in a way I could put in a file. Keep that receipt in your head, by the way. It comes back later, and it isn't the last one. Around the same time, Emma said something at dinner that I didn't understand until much later. She was pushing peas around her plate and announced, completely unprompted, that Daddy had a new phone and she wasn't supposed to tell me because it was a surprise. Ryan laughed it off fast, something about a work phone, and changed the subject to her spelling test. And I let it go because that's what you do at a dinner table with a 7-year-old. Kids say 100 things a day that mean nothing. I just happened to remember that particular nothing for the rest of the spring. The clearest sign wasn't a receipt or a comment at dinner. It was a name. I wasn't snooping. His phone lit up on the counter while he was in the shower, and Emma's cartoon was loud enough that I glanced over out of pure reflex, the way you glance at any lit screen in a room. The preview read, "Can't wait for Thursday," from a contact saved simply as V Regional. I want to be honest with you. I stood in my own kitchen and felt something drop that I hadn't felt since I was 22 and found out a boyfriend had been lying about where he lived. My coworker Priya noticed it the next day at the office, actually. She said I'd been staring at the same cell in a spreadsheet for 10 minutes and asked if everything was okay at home. I told her I was just tired. It was the first lie I told anyone about any of this, and it wouldn't be the last, though the rest of them were his. I almost confronted him twice that week. Once at dinner, with the words already forming, "Who's V?" sitting right behind my teeth. I swallowed them because I could hear exactly how it would go. He'd say it was work. He'd sound wounded that I'd even ask. I'd apologize for asking. I'd seen that exact pattern play out for other women in my life, and I wasn't interested in starring in it myself. So I didn't confront him. I want to explain why, because I think some of you will judge me for it, and I've made my peace with that. I didn't confront him because confrontation, in my professional experience, is the fastest way to lose evidence. The moment you accuse someone who's been hiding something, they stop being careless. Accounts close. Messages get deleted. Cash gets moved somewhere you can't trace it. I've watched it happen in 6-figure embezzlement cases at work. The employee who gets tipped off before the audit is finished is the employee who walks away clean. I didn't want Ryan walking away clean. So instead of asking a single question, I did what I do every single day at Callaway. I opened the file, and I started building it quietly, one document at a time. I've always managed our joint accounts. That was never a red flag to Ryan. It was just our arrangement. The numbers person handles the numbers. Which meant I had full, unremarkable access to everything without ever having to ask permission or explain myself. In the 3rd week of March, I sat down one evening after Emma was asleep and pulled 6 months of statements the way I'd pull them for any client. And there it was, sitting in the withdrawal history like it had been waiting for me to finally look. 4 transfers, spaced roughly 5 days apart, each one just under $9,800. Not round numbers. Specific ones. The kind of specific that isn't an accident, because anyone who's ever worked a financial crimes case knows exactly what number a person is avoiding when they stop just shy of $10,000, again and again on purpose. Structuring. That's the word for it in my line of work. Breaking a large sum into smaller pieces deliberately sized to stay under the threshold that triggers a bank's attention. I'd built entire case reports around exactly this pattern for other people's businesses. I had, in fact, been reviewing almost the identical pattern for a client that same month, a warehouse manager who'd been skimming inventory payouts in amounts just under the reporting line, and I remember sitting at my desk at Callaway thinking, whoever taught this guy to do this was smart. I never once expected to find the same fingerprint in my own checking account, moved out in pieces to a bank I didn't recognize, 3 towns over, called Fern Creek Community. $41,600, gone in 3 weeks. disguised as nothing at all. I didn't say a word to Ryan. I opened a blank document instead, and I started a timeline the same way I'd start one for a client. Date, amount, account, pattern. I added the hotel receipt. I added the gym membership and the shifted schedule. I added V, regional with a question mark beside it, because a name in a text preview isn't evidence yet, it's a lead, and leads get followed, not accused. The camera is what turned the lead into a case. We'd installed it 14 months earlier after 3 packages disappeared off our porch in a single month, a small motion-triggered thing above the garage that mostly caught raccoons, delivery drivers, and once, memorably, our neighbor's escaped beagle. I almost never opened the app. Then one Saturday at the grocery store, our neighbor Mrs. Alvarez mentioned, entirely offhand, over a shared cart lane, that she liked that red Jeep that visits on Tuesdays. It's nice somebody keeps Ryan company when you're traveling for work. I smiled and said something forgettable about carpools and drove home with my hands too tight on the wheel because I hadn't traveled for work on a single Tuesday that spring. Not one. That night, after Emma was asleep, I opened 14 months of footage I'd never bothered to review. Here's a quick pause before I show you what was on it, because if you've ever trusted your gut over someone else's excuses, I think you're going to want to see how this plays out. Hit subscribe now, because in about 2 minutes, this story turns from suspicion into proof, and I don't want you to miss it. The footage confirmed the Jeep first. A red Grand Cherokee, same plate every time, parked in our driveway on 6 separate Tuesday afternoons between February and April, always between 1 and 3, always gone before Emma's bus dropped her off at 3:40. I didn't need a face. I already had a name in his phone and a bank account structure to hide the money that, I'd later learn, funded 4 of those very visits, including 2 hotel stays and, absurdly, a spa gift card I found buried in the Fern Creek statement 3 lines below a transfer for something else entirely. A deposit, $600, marked simply moving company. A moving company deposit slowed me down more than the affair did, honestly, and I think that surprises people. It surprised me too. An affair, as much as it hurts, is still just a decision 2 people made in the moment. A moving deposit means planning. It means a future already being built somewhere I wasn't invited, weeks before he'd said a single word to me about any of it. I went back through the footage with that new question in mind, and I found the day that answered it. A Thursday in April, while Emma and I were at her soccer game across town, a cargo van pulled into our driveway for 40 minutes. Ryan let himself out the side garage door twice, carrying a box each time, once what looked like his late father's toolbox, once a framed print I'd bought him for our 5th anniversary that I hadn't noticed was missing from the hallway until that exact moment, 3 months later, on a laptop screen at 11 at night. He hadn't been leaving me that Thursday. He'd been leaving quietly, 1 box at a time, for weeks, while eating dinner across the table from me and asking Emma about her spelling test. I called an attorney the next morning during my lunch break, a sharp, unhurried woman named Rachel Ford who'd handled 2 fraud-adjacent divorce cases for former clients of mine. I laid the file out for her exactly the way I'd lay one out for Tom, in order, dated, sourced. She didn't ask me if I was sure. She asked me if I had originals of the bank statements and timestamps on the footage, and when I said yes to both, she said something I've thought about every day since. Asterisk good. Then we're not building a case. We're presenting one, asterisk. Rachel explained what Ohio law actually does with a spouse who dissipates marital assets in anticipation of divorce, which is the technical term for exactly what those Fern Creek transfers were. She explained that filing first, quietly, with documentation already attached, would let us ask the court to freeze what remained before Ryan could move any more of it out from under Emma and me. We filed 19 days before that hotel text ever arrived. 19 days I spent packing Emma's lunches, going to client meetings, sitting through a Tuesday dinner where Ryan mentioned, without a flicker of guilt, that he might need to take another overnight trip the following week. I said that sounded fine. I made coffee the next morning like I always did. A courier envelope from Rachel's office showed up on the porch once, and I got the mail before Ryan got home from work purely out of habit, the same habit that had me sorting bills every evening for 7 years. He never noticed. I kept building the folder like it was any other Tuesday, because in every way that mattered to my daughter, it needed to stay exactly that boring. Which brings us back to that Tuesday afternoon, 22 days after I filed, When Ryan texted from a hotel off I-70, supposedly at a leadership retreat, that Meridian's own event calendar, which I checked out of pure reflex, had zero record of. I'm leaving. I already packed. Don't wait up. Underneath it. 30 seconds later, a second message, the kind of line I'd bet money he'd rehearsed out loud in a mirror somewhere. I think we both know this hasn't been working for a while. I grabbed some things from the garage, already. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We both know. Not I decided. Not I'm sorry. We. As if I'd been quietly voting on the collapse of our marriage, right alongside him, instead of building a folder in a locked desktop drawer for 3 straight weeks. I read that sentence twice, and I noticed, the way I notice everything now, that not once in either message did he use the word sorry, or Emma's name, or any acknowledgement that a 7-year-old was going to wake up tomorrow in a house her father had been quietly emptying since March. I didn't call him. I didn't type anything angry, because anger, I've learned, is the one currency that always loses value the second you spend it. I opened the folder on my desktop instead, the one that had been sitting there for 22 days, and I attached 3 things to a single email. The county's date-stamped confirmation of the divorce petition I'd filed 19 days before his text. A 2-page summary Rachel and I had prepared of the Fern Creek transfers, structured beneath the $10,000 threshold, $41,600 total, with dates that lined up precisely against 6 documented visits from a red Jeep registered to a Vanessa Reyes, who, it turned out, worked 2 floors above him at Meridian's regional office, and a link to a shared drive containing 4 clips of security footage, timestamped and unedited, showing the vehicle, the visits, and the moving van. Remember those 6 sentences I mentioned? Here's exactly what they said. I told him the petition had already been filed. I told him the court had already granted a temporary order freezing what remained of our joint accounts before he ever texted me, not after, so nothing left could quietly disappear the way the first 41,000 had. I told him Rachel would be in touch about custody, and that given the documented pattern, we'd be requesting Emma's primary residence stay with me while the rest was sorted out. I told him I wasn't interested in an argument over text, and I ended with the only sentence in the whole message that wasn't strictly procedural. I don't owe you a reaction, Ryan. I already gave you 7 years of the benefit of the doubt. This is just paperwork now, I hit send. I set the phone face down next to my laptop, the way I had that very first afternoon, and I finished the report I'd been working on before any of it started. He called 4 times in the next hour. The first voicemail was mostly silence and a long breath. The second asked, tightly, what I thought I was doing. By the third, his voice had the particular crack in it that shows up right before someone stops performing and starts panicking, something close to Claire. Come on. We can talk about this like adults. The fourth was just my name. Twice, and then nothing. I let all 4 go to voicemail. I made Emma grilled cheese, helped her with the exact same fraction worksheet from March, and put her to bed at 8:15 exactly like every other Tuesday, because that was the whole point. That had always been the point. The consequences arrive the way consequences usually do once the paperwork is already moving, which is to say quietly, mostly out of my hands, and considerably slower than any of it felt that Tuesday night. The court's temporary order froze what was left of the joint accounts within the week, which meant the remaining balance, roughly $44,000, stayed put instead of following the first $41,000 out the door. Rachel used the structured transfers and the moving van footage to argue dissipation of assets in the settlement, and Ohio courts, it turns out, don't look kindly on a spouse who spends 3 weeks quietly emptying a garage and a bank account before ever saying a word out loud. Ryan's attorney tried, at mediation, to argue the footage was some kind of privacy violation. Rachel pointed out calmly that the camera was mine, mounted on my own garage, recording a driveway I paid the mortgage on, and I watched the objection die somewhere in the middle of that sentence. I watched Ryan's attorney glance sideways at him once the timestamps lined up next to the bank statements, that specific look attorneys give a client when the file in front of them has stopped being a negotiation and started being a math problem with only one answer. Custody worked out close to what we'd asked for, mostly because a judge doesn't need much convincing that the parent who kept every routine exactly the same through the worst month of her adult life is the more stable one. especially against a parent whose own timeline showed him arranging an apartment before he told his daughter anything was changing at all. Ryan kept his job at Meridian, though I heard through a mutual contact that Vanessa didn't stay past that summer, whether that was company policy about two people in the same regional office or something quieter falling apart on its own. I honestly don't know, and for the first time in a long while, I found I didn't need to know. He called me exactly once after the settlement was finalized, not to apologize, but to ask, almost bewildered, how I'd managed to be so ready. I told him the truth. I didn't get ready the day you texted me, Ryan. I got ready the day the numbers stopped adding up, and I kept getting ready every single day after that, quietly at my own kitchen table, until you finally caught up to what I already knew. People don't usually announce they're leaving. In my experience, both professional and otherwise, they quietly stop showing up in the small details first. A phone turned face down, a schedule that doesn't quite add up, a number that's just a little too specific to be an accident. By the time someone actually says the words out loud, the leaving already happened weeks, sometimes months earlier. The text is just the paperwork catching up to a decision someone already made alone. I think about that Tuesday sometimes, the coffee going cold, the folder sitting open, the version of me who could have screamed or begged or driven 2 hours to that hotel and made a scene in the parking lot. I understand why some people would have. I just wasn't willing to hand him one more thing he could point to later as the reason things fell apart. He'd already written that story for himself weeks before he ever told me the ending. All I did was make sure the real one was the one that got filed with the court. So here's what I'll leave you with, because I'd genuinely like to know. If you'd found the proof before your partner ever said a word, would you confront them the moment you found it? Or would you quietly prepare the way I did and wait for them to be the one who finally said it out loud? Where's the line in your mind between protecting yourself and staying honest in the meantime? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear that quiet isn't the same thing as weak, and I'll see you in the next one.